Hello, everybody. Welcome to tonight's special intro. It's actually just going to be a special stream. I'm pretty sure it's going to go on throughout the entire stream, and it's a continuation of Gil Elvgren. He's one of my favorite illustrators. He's an amazing painter, and I'm going to show you guys, for those of you who are just tuning in for the very first time, it's going to be a brief introduction about who Gil Elvgren was. So that is Gil Elvgren right there, 1914 to 1980. I have this amazing collection, this book that I have, and I decided to go in depth and talk about his journey, his influences, and his accomplishments in general, how much influence he had on illustration of that period. So just to start out and give you guys a better understanding, he was the most important pinup and glamour artist of the 20th century. One of his most recognizable works is from his Coca-Cola illustrations. Gil Elvgren's Coca-Cola subjects portrayed the American dream of a secure, comfortable lifestyle, but he's well known for illustrations for magazine stories, often capturing the timeless scenes that reflected the hopes, fears, and joys of their readers. In the field of advertising, alongside his Coca-Cola work, he contributed to campaigns for prominent American companies and products such as Orange Crush, Schultz Beer, Sealy Mattress, General Electric, Sylvania, and Napa Auto Parts. With his work for the Brown and Bigelow, the Coca-Cola, and other national advertising assignments, and his magazine work, Elvgren was much in demand as an artist. His time booked up more than a year ahead of his output. Elvgren also stood out not just for his painting and advertising graphics. He was also a notable professional photographer, and you guys will see that as the slideshow goes. You'll see some examples of his photography that he used to create these amazing paintings. So long before he attended his first art class in 1933, Elvgren had been impressed by the early pretty girl illustrators like Charles Donna Gibson, Howard Chandler Christie, Harrison Fisher, as well as McClellan Barkley, Haddon H. Sundblom, huge influence, Andrew Loomis, another amazing artist, Charles E. Chambers, and Pruitt Carter. And you guys can check out all of these illustrators that I was talking about. I go into depth about each and every one of them. I show you guys their paintings. I talk about their history as well. You could check that out by heading over to the video section and filtering it based on collection, where you will find a folder called Special Streams. And in that folder, you'll see parts 1 through 7 for you guys to catch up. Each and every one of them is unique. Each and every one has something really interesting to show, to talk about. So it's well worth it. You guys should definitely check those out. But continuing on, early on, Elvgren tore out magazine covers and individual pages, learning illustration by artists he admired or who interested him, which became his ritual. These pages became a comprehensive collection that would later influence both his painting technique and his approach to particular commissions. So something to talk about real quick over here. That is a really important thing to do. I think as somebody who's aspiring to become an illustrator, to become an artist, not just to make money, not just to make themselves a name or whatever, but just to keep the fire burning. It's an excellent way to do that by collecting things, putting them up on the wall, looking at them every day, admiring the stuff so that you can continue to feel motivated. There's always going to be roadblocks. There are going to be bad days. There's going to be things that you're going to go through mentally as you're leveling up, as you're trying to improve, that are going to be deterrents. So it's good to surround yourself by things that really keep the spirits going. You're looking at this stuff and you're like, oh, this is so amazing. I want to, create content like this or something similar, or be in this field. Look at what putting in effort produces. So it's something that it's crucial. Surround yourself with this stuff, and it'll inspire you to keep going. All right, so continuing on, Elvgren shared his admiration for the Brandywine School of Philosophy, of paintings with Norman Rockwell. So two names that are really important. First of all, Brandywine School of illustrators. That's a really important one. And I'm going to go into a little bit of a description of who created the Brandywine School of Philosophy, and how much influence that person had on pretty much all these artists, all the artists that I've mentioned earlier that inspired Gil Elvgren, himself, the Brandywine School, and other artists to follow. It's really important. The creator of the Brandywine School of Philosophy is Howard Pyle, and his work is also really incredible. In fact, it goes back to 1800s, but art that is created now is still using his contributions. For example, his depiction of what pirates look like was used to create the look for Johnny Depp's outfit in Pirates of the Caribbean. So Howard Pyle was really responsible for that sort of depiction of what pirates looked like, and it went on to influence many. So just going a little bit more into the history, the development of glamour illustration in the 20th century was the result of an earlier growth in commercial art as painting techniques continued to develop and improve. Now also remember, in that period, photography wasn't amazing. I mean, you could even see just from some of the photographs that you're seeing from Gil Elvgren, like he at that point already probably had like really professional cameras, but they were limited. They were limited in terms of what it looks like, and compared to what iPhones are able to take, and the quality of that outcome is huge difference. So painting and illustration had a lot more presence in commercial for everything, whether it was like TV advertisements, billboards, labels, whatever you could think of. It wasn't so much photography, it was a lot more to do with illustration. So but aside from that, despite now photography being really big, something that photography doesn't do is create style, visual style. As you see here, this is still very stylized despite it having realism. There's something about it that taking a photograph in a real world wouldn't be able to produce. So whether photography or the equipment gets really amazing, it can't substitute the creative output from an artist and the style that they have. And considering each and every artist has their own style and has their own unique visual products, I think it's something that can't be substituted. Especially now with these like AI photos as well, like that you're seeing, they're not really voices of anybody, it's just an algorithm. So that's something that AI can't even substitute. Despite some of the results looking really good, it's not coming from an artist's generated concept. So that neither can that scenario really substitute illustration, painting. So, all right, going on. Within 10 years of Pyle's first published illustration, the American public was introduced to the first real pinup. This idealized all-American creation, blending the girl next door with the girl of your dreams, was called Into Life in Boston about 1887 by the pen of Charles Donna Gibson, who was president from 1867 to 1944. So just a quick recap of that. That was the very first pinup girl when it comes to American illustration. So Charles Donna Gibson was the one who created the Gibson girl, basically. And from there, it all spun out. Like there were, people were enamored, by the outcome, what it looked like, his style, and it was everywhere. I mean, if you guys look at it, or if you watch the first stream of Gil Elvgren, part 1, you'll get a better understanding of what that is. So I'm not going to get too further into Gil Elvgren. I'd like to continue to talk about his influences. And of course, you guys can catch up on all that from the previous streams if you follow through with it. you'll hear more about each and every one of those artists, and basically the history of that time period. I'm gonna show you guys Howard Pyle. So he was basically responsible for the Brandywine School philosophy, and his approach was very different. It wasn't technical. He wasn't really going into specific details and teaching people all that anatomy and such. His approach was more philosophical. He inspired people through ideas and conversation and concepts, and he took people out into nature and he taught them to draw while being surrounded by nature, and trying to give this more of like this natural sort of I'm gonna say spiritual approach to painting, to inspire and create awe through conversation, through ideas, through realizations, and yeah, just kind of went from there. And you'll hear, like, as I go through a lot of these other artists who were inspired by him, quote him and talk about what that process was like, what the classes were like with him, and that's yet to come. There's an artist specifically who was a huge fan of Howard Pyle, who I will talk about later. Let me see here where. I'm going to talk about Howard Pyle real quick. So 1853 to 1911. He was an illustrator and author. In 1894, he began teaching illustration at the Drexel Institute of Art, Science and Industry, now Drexel University. After 1900, he founded his own school of art and illustration and named the Howard Pyle School of Illustration Art. Let's see, I'm not going to go way more into it. His 1883 classic publication, The Merry Adventures of Robin Hood, remains in print. He's also well known for his illustrations of pirates and is credited with creating what has become the modern stereotype of pirate dress. His work influenced the design of costumes for movie pirates, from Errol Flynn to Johnny Depp. Pyle was widely respected during his life and continues to be well regarded by illustrators and fine artists. His contemporary, Vincent van Gogh, wrote in a letter to his brother Theo that Pyle's work struck me dumb with admiration. His illustrations are vivid and imaginative, yet not entirely fantastic or contrived, lending them an air of colorful realism. He was also a brief student at the Art Students League of New York. Also a really important school, still present, and you guys can actually go there and take classes. There are no requirements aside from being able to pay for very, very affordable classes. So that was just like a brief overview to get you guys more familiar with this really important name. And I'm going to continue and introduce you guys to a new artist today. This is another artist that has influenced Gil Elvgren, and his name was James Montgomery Flagg. So I'm going to pause this real quick while I talk to you guys about him. As you could see, for those of you who have been following, his work is kind of similar to Charles Donna Gibson. You know, it's pen work, the style of how he's creating these scenes. It's kind of similar. It's of course it's still his own style to it. The way he draws faces, the way he draws features, the subject matter, you know, the angles and such. That's all pretty much his unique style. So here is more about James Montgomery Flagg. So 1877 to 1960. So just to give you guys, that's why I keep mentioning the era. I think it's really important because it did pave the way for illustration. You could kind of see how things continued to to trickle from there, that it's all connected in some way. It isn't just like an error and then it passes and then nobody really cares or talks about it. They still continue, as you've heard, Howard Pyle back to like 1811, still continue to influence artists today. So they just kind of continue to pave that direction, and they paved it for each other as well. For those of you who have been following along, there are a lot of companies that hired these artists, and from generation to generation, basically, continuing on that direction of using illustrators to create content. Okay, so he was an artist, a comic artist and illustrator. He worked in mediums ranging from fine art painting to cartoons, but he's best remembered for his political posters, particularly his 1917 poster, Uncle Sam. So if you guys ever seen that, I Want You, that poster, that's James Montgomery Flagg. That's his work. He used his own face, adding age and a goatee. So it's him. It's actually him in that painting. Flagg was also a student at the Art Students League of New York for 4 years before heading to Europe to study painting in London and Paris. In 1900, he returned to the US, where he became a productive and ambitious artist, working for all the outstanding publications of his time. The magazine Judge featured his gouache painting of pretty girls, stylistically comparable to Charles Donna Gibson's art. In 1903, Flagg created his first comic strip, Nervy Nate, which is 1903 to 1909, for Judge. The series stars Nate, a sneaky, mustached beggar who often runs in with the law. Nat was drawn with a bulbous nose and wears a high hat and tailcoat. So let's see how far that is. Yeah, it's a little bit, that's ways away, I'm gonna say. So I'm gonna get back to this right after I give you guys a better, well, that's it right there. That is Nervy Nat, basically. That's the comic book. And the controversy there is that he based this off of an actor, and I'll get into that now. Actually, I'll just talk about it since it's up on screen. So because of these characteristic traits, author Tim Tresswell suggested in his book Tramp in America that Nervy Nat might have taken inspiration from comedian W.C. Fields. While there are physical similarities between the two, there is one major difference. Nervy Nat had a mustache. Nervy Nat has a mustache. There's also no proof whether Flagg was familiar with Fields at the time. So that's something to consider, actually. This is something that I talked about before when it comes to painting, when it comes to drawing. Using your environment, or using things that you're seeing as inspiration and changing some things about it here and there to kind of create and make it your own. I'm going to say in this case, it's a little bit too similar, but it's not a big deal because, again, this is a comic book. So it's not like he's trying to be a comedian like W.C. Fields and use his content within his work or something. He's just using the appearance of the character, and he's creating comics with that. So I'm going to show you guys here what W.C. Fields looks like, and you kind of saw it briefly as I was like flipping through this stuff. But just before I do that, I think this is kind of a funny comic. It's just him seeing this woman who's walking her dog and she's dressing up her dog. So he came up with this idea of like, oh, I'm going to dress up my pig. I have a pig at home. So he like did the same thing. He kind of wanted to mimic high society sort of behavior or whatnot. And he's walking it, and all of a sudden the pig just goes wild and causes problems. And as you can see, he runs into a cop. who I guess takes him in. So that's it. You know, this is W.C. Fields, and you could see, just flipping back here, you know, when you're looking at the first panel, it's pretty similar. You know, it's a pretty similar likeness to it. So it's hard to say that Flagg wasn't familiar with Fields at the time. I mean, the resemblance is very, very close, aside from that mustache. So that's one of his like earlier comics. I'm gonna see if there's like other ones here. Oh, you guys will see all this other stuff as well. So going on, between February and September of 1912, Flagg drew a picture series, The Adventures of Kitty Cobb. And I'm going to switch to that. That's it right here. Which appeared in major U.S. Sunday newspapers. It told the adventures of a pretty girl and her struggles in the big city. The work is historically interesting because it gives a good impression of what the treatment of women in the early 20th century was like. Although Flagg was progressive in his portrayal of a young woman and ambitious working girl, it remains a product of its time. So, you know, there are certain things that are being said that in modern day we would just be like, oh, that's pretty sexist. But yeah, again, it's a product of its time, and it was considered to be progressive, what he was going for. So anyways, going on, Kitty caused mayhem wherever she goes. She is portrayed as a clumsy woman, unsuitable to do the hard and difficult work. Her good looks always bring out the worst in male behavior. Many male characteristics are either distracted by her, don't take her seriously, or try to seduce her. At the time, Kitty Cobb was nevertheless very popular. That's a pretty cool concept, I'm going to say. It's a really interesting one. It's something different. Still grounded in real life, but it's a comic book concept. It's a comic book strip in a way. But the interesting thing is, and one of the reasons why I included this, is because it's not very much different from modern day. As much as we'd like to say progressive, like, look at what's going on right now. It's absolutely ridiculous, and people have reverted to being complete idiots, where they're now praising Nazis, you know. So this is kind of like history repeating itself, but people just look different, and they have fancy equipment and more fancy distractions, basically. But their ideologies, the general public's idea of how things should be, is very much stuck in this really stupid state, you know, where things like this are still happening. For example, what they were saying, it's women weren't taken seriously, or they were like being hit on, or they're distracted by the looks. You know, they find that to be problematic. I'm going to say the biggest difference is that we have female politicians now, decision makers. You know, women were part of that. But still, considering that things have reverted back to a lot of this stuff, and a lot of the sexist concepts where they're saying a woman can't even decide how to use her own body, that's ridiculous. So it's kind of interesting to see how, even though this says that it's of its time, there's still a lot of similarity to that time, despite it being like I'm going to say 1910, so it's been over 100 years. You know, it's been like 110 years basically, and still 110 years. Just picture that, 110 years, and still the same stupid concepts are dominating mainstream culture. That just says how much we have to actually change things around. You know, that we have to collectively come together and start to push for change that's going to be signed into law. We have to like kick people out. You know, these are all decisions made by old people. That's one of the reasons why we haven't really progressed, is because the people in charge, they're 60, 70 years old. So they're of the era of that time. And what they're doing is they're brainwashing people who are young to appease them. You know, like they're basically saying, hey, if you appease us, if you act like us, if you do what we tell you to, and you believe in the things that we tell you to, you're going to get our position. So they're perpetuating these problems. This isn't like some sort of innate thing. It's not some sort of innate thing for kids of a certain type or whatever. This is taught, this is perpetuated by old people. So these old farts who don't belong in our modern day economy and the outlook that most people have. The way that people interact now is way more progressive. I'm going to say it's just that politics and the media and how what it chooses to surface and present is kind of setting the tone in a way. But we don't have that huge level of segregation. There's people of all cultures interacting with each other, working with each other, etc. It's just this like underlying current of ignorance that's popping up. But anyways, yeah, we just got to kick out all these old farts and their pawns. Basically, all these kids were pawns for them. They're just young vessels continuing on the same mistakes that have been made. We got to boot them out. We really got to come together and do something about this. It's ridiculous. I'm reading this stuff and I'm outraged that still to this day we're having the same stupid problems 110 years later. All right, anyways, in 1913, Flagg created another picture series about a young woman, a girl better known as Dorothy Perkins. So that's 1913 to 1914. The series started a middle-class girl, Dorothy Perkins, who is spoiled by an overindulgent mother. In 1946, Flagg published his autobiography, Roses and the Buckshot. The book gained infamy since the artist is quite outspoken about his profession and certain colleagues in one chapter. He reflects on cartoonists with the following words. I am fond of cartoonists, yet they are a very intelligent race of men, except that they have a curious complex. They all think they can draw. They are quite sincere in this delusion, even to the point of calling their office studios, and they have models, which is very nice. In America, next to baseball, comics are funnies have become the most popular of our obsession. I'm looked upon as a leper because I dislike both of those things. I can hardly wait on Sunday morning to get the papers so that I can take the funnies and stuff them in the scrap basket. Naturally, there's something wrong with me. 130 million people can't be that wrong, maybe. So he's kind of like playing on words here, and he's just being like sarcastic, I'm going to say, because obviously by the looks of his work, he's also a comic book artist. He does some cartoons. If you look at Nervy Net, he's also a cartoon character. So he's just kind of, I guess, poking these contemporaries with a stick and just mocking them, while also being like, hey, would I really mean this if I'm doing all this work that's very similar to yours? I think he was just being boisterous. He doesn't mean it, and he's not sincere about it, but it did, I guess, stir up some controversy, and people were, of course, like gossiping about it, like, I can't believe they said that. But that pretty much does it, y'all. That's James Montgomery Flagg. You guys kind of got an idea of his personality, but also I like the subject matters, the things that he's bringing up, because they're sort of philosophical. They make you think about stuff like the idea of a girl who's being spoiled by her mother, a girl who is an everyday woman, who's attractive, and she is going through life, and you kind of get a glimpse into that. You step into their shoes through these comics, and you get to see what's going on. And that's kind of like what you're seeing here in The Adventures of Kitty Cobb, the one that is trying to just live her life as a person, as opposed to like this attractive female, and how she's coming across these problems. So you could see coworkers there, and they have these like snobby expressions on their face looking at her, while the manager, I'm guessing the manager, or probably somebody who is there, is enamored by her, so they're just like jealous of her. And of course that's like a really toxic environment, and it's frustrating. So I could see how that becomes a really annoying scenario. guess he's the attention of the floor walker. Much to the envy and disgust of the other girls, Mr. Tripper asks her to the theater. So yeah, they get super jealous about it. But this isn't as much as I could find, which kind of sucks, because I would like to get like a full issue and see what the Adventures of Kitty Cobb was like. Or I'm gonna say Nerving Net is more of like a Sunday newspaper thing. It's amusing, but I'm gonna say that these other ones are more interesting because they're kind of grounded and they do have these like real world scenarios. And also note that that's what James Montgomery Flagg decided to do. He decided to do it about a woman. He's not, obviously not a sexist person, and he's not too focused on this like gender idea, and he's more focused on like a human experience. So I like that about his work. I like that that's his choice. This is another example here. The Adventures of Kitty Cobb. And this is his work. And that's actually him in there, despite it kind of looking different. But it's hard to say what he actually looked like because this photo is so old. And that is a painting that you guys are all familiar with. So just remember, you guys learned today who created that painting, and you got a better idea of him. I also really like this drawing here. This idea that's something that we're currently struggling with, how pretty much most of these countries are run by people who are basically evil. The things that is happening in Iran, the fact that women are being killed and that people who are protesting and saying, let us live and have and enjoy our life, they're being killed for that, which is absolutely ridiculous. A woman is being beaten to death because of the way that she's dressed. That's absurd. That's like some sort of like, I don't know, early 200s AD or something. That's some sort of story that you would hear in that time period. But it's still going on now in some of these countries, so I think it's just kind of interesting. And also, I think it's a good depiction of like capitalism, how capitalism is dominating the entire planet, and there's only a certain amount of people who are willing to fight against it and fight for good, basically. And I think that number just has to rise, and people have to really take matters into their own hands. It's because of apathy, and it's because of this like complicit sort of culture that people are living in, that things are going downwards. And I think that's all systematic. I think this idea that people are complicit, it's because they've created a system that dangles toys in front of people's eyes, whether it's through social media and people are stuck on it for hours, or they create new iPhones or phones or little gadgets, basically just saying, hey, look at this real cool thing, just distract yourself with this while we just basically create all these repulsive scenarios of like sex trafficking and child labor and child abuse and exploiting the planet, drilling oil and displacing a lot of like native people around there who are just living a peaceful life, and just killing people, bombing areas. It's absurd, all that. But they're doing it because they're just like, hey, pay attention to this dangling little toy that we have in front of you. Like, look at this new series, look at this magazine talking about Desperate Housewives or whatever. And people are like, oh yeah, that's cool, let me focus on that. And instead of actually being like, no, get out, get the fuck out of the White House, get the fuck out of our political system and economical decisions. We don't like you. You're a terrible person. You make bad decisions. Get out. I think that's really what the message should be. That's what people should be focusing on all over the world, because we're seeing this corruption and abuse and, all this negligence that caused the pandemic. All that is done because of corrupt people who don't care about anything other than themselves. They don't care about anything other than money, power, and fame. So anyways, I think this kind of really sums it up. I think it's a really good painting, and it's called Life. It's people who are just pushing back against these demonic creatures basically who are trying to just destroy the planet. All right, moving on. Let's move on to the next painting. Beautiful work. You know, again, it's something that I think is unique about art and illustration, is that in this, for example, it's not hyper realistic, but the way that he was able to draw and create all these lines really breathes life into it. There's like fluidity towards this painting, towards this drawing. The way that he created these lines, he brought life to each and every one of those lines. When it comes to the hair, you know, just how he was able to render all this stuff, and just some of the shadow lines as well. Like if you look at the nose, right around where the nostril is and going up towards the bridge of the nose, like there's some interesting lines there that don't look really technical, but they're just in the right place in order to bring life to it. Beautiful illustration. So here's another one. That's a girl, you know. This is the one that is about a spoiled woman by her mother, who's also spoiled as well. And that's another story, which would be pretty cool to know what the themes were, what the scenarios were. It just sucks so bad. There are no prints of this, and it was really difficult to just find this. As you could see, it's like a photo of a photo. But just to give you guys an idea of it, here I'm gonna say this is Kitty Cobb, The Adventures of Kitty Cobb again, of an attractive woman and how other women are kind of looking at her in either admiration or envy. But I think the pen work is amazing. I really do enjoy it, and you could see again in comparison to like Charles Donna Gibson, how much influence they've had. And if you guys have been following along, you could see how each of these artists really appreciated one another, but there is a certain focus for each and every one of them. For example, with Gil Elvgren, it's Hadden H. Sundblom. Huge influence. If you guys go back to that artist, you will see how much influence he had over Gil Elvgren. I'm going to say for Norman Rockwell, it was J.C. Leyendecker. You could see the resemblance in their work, and despite that, they're still very much unique to their own right. You know, they're not just copying or whatever. It's very much, you could see the influence, but you could see how they just took it to another level, took it to something more unique to their for their own voice. And as you could see, James Montgomery Flagg is influenced by Charles Donna Gibson. So each and every artist, again, this is what's beautiful about art in general. Each artist has their own voice and their own creativity, their own subject matter, and their own outcome. And that's what makes it so fascinating, to be able to explore that. Here there's more. Well, you guys kind of seen that actually. How much he took time to render out all this stuff. And it's also cool to see, again, this is like a glimpse into time. You know, this is like going back and seeing what people used to dress like. You know, what was the aesthetic, just going back to here and seeing what the garbs were like, what the furniture was like at that time. It's just really cool to get into that and observe all that stuff. But I'm gonna say this is probably it for James Montgomery Flagg. There wasn't that much for me to collect. I think this is kind of like, well, what really grabbed my attention were all these pieces. So there wasn't that much of it. So I'm just gonna spend more time giving you guys a better understanding of James Montgomery Flagg, I believe. there's like a section here talking about Gil Elvgren where it mentions James Montgomery Flagg. Okay, so going back to the Gibson Girl, which I was talking about, was done by Charles Donna Gibson, who influenced James Montgomery Flagg. Quickly becoming the sweetheart of America, the Gibson Girl was depicted primarily in pen and ink drawings. Her success was so overwhelming that Gibson Girl drawings were soon seen on front covers and as two-page centerfolds in such popular magazines as Life and Collier. The single female of the early drawings developed into a group of females, then a man and a woman, or mixed groups. The male figure, known as the Gibson Man, was enthusiastically taken up by the admirers of the Gibson Girl. By 1900, the Gibson Girl and the Gibson Man had attained unprecedented international popularity. The image of the Gibson Girl was seen almost everywhere throughout the United States and Europe. Gibson's drawings were published and reproduced as prints, lithos, calendars, centerfolds, and magazine covers, as well as numerous advertising specialty products with such as playing cards, notepads, ink bottlers, blotters, and ladies' fans. Even wallpaper, fine china, jewelry boxes, and umbrellas carried the pictures. So that's how renowned that was, and that's how much of a big deal it was at that time, as an introduction to pinup. I'm going to say that was like the pinup art of that era. The Gibson Girl enchanted more than one generation of Americans. Though she had her beginning in the early Art Nouveau period, she was still going strong in the Roaring 20s as a flapper, jitterbugging and dancing the Charlton in damn, I can't read my own writing here. In speakeasies. Gibson updated the style and manner of his drawings and the fashion in them to enchant a new audience during the Art Deco era, which is 1920 to 1930. And that's a really important era as well. It's something that's I'm going to be talking about in another special intro that's not connected to Gil Elvgren. So just remember that Art Deco era is from 1920 to 1930. So let's move on to more specific. So another member of the Gibson Christie Fisher Club of glamour artists was James Montgomery Flagg. He painted many mainstream subjects, as did the others in the group, but the focus of his work was painting pictures of beautiful women. He became legendary for his classic World War I recruiting poster, Uncle Sam. Flagg was excellent with the pen and ink, which impressed Elvgren, who, despite never using this medium, he nonetheless appreciated Flagg's and Gibson's talent for brilliant line drawings. Many of the leading illustrators who directly influenced Elvgren as his career began to take shape in the 1930s were students of Howard Pyle. So this is something that I was talking about earlier. That's why I mentioned him at the beginning of the stream, since he'll be a reoccurring name. Howard Pyle's Brandywine School. Right, he was a student of Howard Pyle's Brandywine School. Chief among them was, I'm going to say, this is the next artist. Harvey T. Dunn, 1884 to 1952. So Harvey T. Dunn was Pyle's protege and most accomplished student. Dunn also became an influential teacher who passed on his own form of Pyle's philosophy to hundreds of artists. So let's just talk about it real quick. Let's talk about him. I don't think there's that much on him either. I couldn't really find that much information. But yeah, I think he will Well, actually, yeah, there's a little bit actually on him. So Harvey T. Dunn, 1884 to 1952, was an American painter and teacher. He's best known for his what does this say? I'm going to say his crazy intimate magnum opus, The Prairie. Oh, it's Prairie. His prairie intimate magnum opus, The Prairie is My Garden. In the painting, a mother and her 2 children are out gathering flowers with the quintessential prairie of the Great Plains. So I'm going to go back real quick. I'm going to show you guys what... Uh-oh. Is it here, or is it very separate? Yeah, it's separate. This is it. That is... that's what he's most famous for. It's actually a really beautiful painting. I mean, there's so much complexity to that as far as colors go. Just look at that. And I want to say it's very similar to like Impressionism, you know, because it's not incredibly detailed. As you can see, it's not like every single strain of grass is drawn and, you know, separated or whatever. This is more of just mixing colors in ways and just kind of giving you the impression and the idea that it is there, with some detail here and there, which is really well done. You know, it's done in a way where it's all cohesive. It all kind of works together. There isn't anything that really steals your attention or is incredibly sharp in focus. You know, you could see that. The subject matter is there. It's the mother and her children. They're collecting flowers in this plain. But all of it works well. Like the background, including the subject, they're all one, basically. But what I really like about his painting is actually that the complexity to all the colors, and there's a certain texture. I'm gonna say, like looking at their skin, right? It really does seem. This is another instance of so well rendered. It looks real, but it doesn't. It's like right in between. It's surfing that middle ground, kind of. It looks more real than real, I wanted to say, really. Like, there's something about it that really pops out, more so than if you were to just, like, take a photo. And I think that has to do with, like, the texture, like how the paint is just applied onto the canvas. It's not incredibly smooth. There's some volume to it. And I think because of that, it kind of pops out more. It has more life to it than, I would say, a photo. And I also really like that it captures a moment, that it's not like they're looking directly into the camera as if though like you're present, you know, you're a watcher or something. It's kind of like capturing a moment of a person and how they're feeling without them actually paying attention to the viewer, you know. So it's a real moment. You know, it's something that genuinely happens. It's not a pose. It's not artificial in some way. So I think that's also what makes it such a beautiful painting as well. But yeah, going on, Dunn was one of a small group of Pyle's defining students who were to revolutionize the illustration world, and today are collectively known as the Brandywine School. After 2 years with Pyle, Dunn established his own studio and immediately began a successful career in illustration. He was a prodigious painter, able to produce 55 complete paintings in a week for various clients. In 11, Is that 11 or is that a quote? Sorry, it's my crappy writing. Yeah, it's a quote. So, in a week of various clients, a contemporary described his style in these terms. He literally attacked the canvas, and sometimes I thought he was to impale the painting with his brush. So he's like really aggressive, I guess, when he would paint, or it was just the speed, at which he was painting. But as you could see, it still brought about something really amazing. As Dunn grew in stature as an illustrator, he became interested in helping other artists, as Ada Caldwell and Howard Pyle had helped him. In 1915, Dunn and fellow artist Charles Shepard Chapman established the Leonia School of Illustration. Leonia School of Illustration. All that I'm really doing is carrying on Howard Pyle's idea. This is a quote from Dunn. Howard Pyle did not teach art, and this is something I was talking about earlier about Howard Pyle and what his technique was. Howard Pyle did not teach art. Art cannot be taught any more than life can be taught. His main purpose was to quicken our souls that we might render services to the majesty of simple things. So as you could see, like, that really was the approach. It was more of this like intuitive sort of inspiring people to be more connected spiritually, more connected with concepts and ideas, rather than being really, really technical. I don't fully agree. I do think that you could actually teach art to some degree. I'm not going to say completely, but you can teach the skills and inspire people to pursue the field more and more until they find their voice, until they find more interest in whatever it is. So I'm kind of like, I don't know. I see what they're talking about, but I don't fully agree. I do think that it can be taught to some degree, to some extent, not completely. Dunn was not interested in teaching painting techniques. His approach was philosophically oriented. He spoke about spirit, emotions, and discourse at length. He discussed his philosophy of life and art, offered group criticism, and strode from easel to easel, discussing each student's work in turn. Dunn also taught at the Art Students League of New York. So here's yet another person. This is how long the Art Students League has been around. I mean, it's been around since the early 1800s, or like mid 1800s, I'm going to say. And it had so many people attend that school and connect with one another through it. So once again, highly encourage you guys to check it out if you're really into the field. It's a fun environment. And it really just includes everybody who's interested in it. It doesn't really specify things only to academic results, like how you would see some of these colleges where you need a specific grade point average or whatever it is to be able to attend it. There, it's just if you're interested and you could pay and you respect their approach, then you can attend those classes and learn a lot. But just going through, I'm going to spend some time showing you guys another piece of his illustration. I really love this about his work. Unlike the previous ones that you guys have seen, his themes are a little bit more, I'm going to say, adventurous. I don't know if that's a good way to describe it, but there's more to it. Like, it's not really connected to modern society in some way. There's a little bit more wonder to it. And I guess the themes are different here. You could see that it's like something to do with the Wild West in a way, right? And his work is really expressive. Like, if you take a look at the floor in the shadows, right, it's not incredibly polished stuff that you've seen. Like, for example, Elvgren's work is way more polished than this. this is a little bit more chaotic, and that's kind of what I guess the client was talking about when they were saying like he attacked the canvas and he thought he was going to impale the canvas with his brush. You could see that in this painting pretty well. Like, despite that though, it's still pretty well rendered. Like, if you look at his vest, it's not incredibly defined, but it's defined enough for it to just look pretty realistic. His pants as well, like, there aren't really incredibly definitive lines there, but they're placed in such a way where you could see that the pants are turning according to like his body movement, right? There's like complexity also in his color choices, which I also love, and I think that's what really makes these paintings also so unique. Is as you saw in a previous painting, there's just a lot going on over there. Just in the pants alone, there's like yellow, green, blue, grays, all of them kind of like mixed in. Purples, there's some purples there as well, and it works well. There's nothing that really calls your attention, but they're still present there. Looking at his foot, like unlike Norman Rockwell, for example, right? Like, if you remember how he was drawing shoes, super realistic, like incredible. But here it's still done in a way where it doesn't look like an amateur drawing. It's not like, oh, this guy doesn't know what he's doing and he's just kind of putting blotches. Like, it's very intentional. All of his brush strokes have a purpose, have rhyme and reason to them. Looking at the horse, looking at the horse that's towards the back further, just looking at the face, you could see so much complexity and color when it comes to the face there as well. And I'm still like enamored by it, like just how they're able to do that. And if you guys have seen me work with India inks when it comes to coloring comics on Wednesdays, 9 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, I spend a lot of time mixing colors and trying to get the color that I'm looking for. But here there's just multitudes of them, and it all works well. It all connects. The horse is a perfect example of them. In fact, both of them. If you were to just take some time and study and pay attention to all the little sections and notice what kind of colors are used, or just try to come up with color schemes for it, it's very complicated. There's a lot going on over there. But aside from that, I think the composition is great. The subject matter is fun. It's something to do with, I guess, bandits trying to break in. I can't tell because he's pointing up a gun at the top, which is weird. Like, what is he exactly pointing with his gun to? But interesting, like, body language there. I also really like the body language and color composition. What kind of colors are being used? There's a lot of turquoise and blue and yellow throughout the entire painting. You could see it in the mountains. There's some yellows there. There's some like orange, reds. And that's also present in the outfit of the guy who's trying to open the door. You could see the yellows and the greens and reds. There's like little slivers of red there. So it just shows that he unifies the colors all around, not just in the mountains, not in certain sections. It's in every single part of the painting. Like, the guys that are on the horse also have those colors as well. You could see it in their jackets. There's that turquoise, gray, green, yellow, and red all throughout his outfit, including around his wrist as well. If you notice, there's a little bit of that red. So it just circles through and comes back to the top of to the top where the mountains are. It's all included. All right, so that's that. I'm gonna get back to this. Yeah, his painting is very moody, I'm gonna say too. Like, there's some sort of dream quality to it, I'm gonna say, from each and every one of these. But let me just go back to that one. Here in comparison, let's say to McClellan Barkley, right? He had a similar kind of, I'm gonna say a slightly similar rendering style, but there were very vibrant colors and there was that contrast between the background and the foreground and the people. Whereas here, even though they're rendered out in a way that pop out, like you could see that she pops out, her face pops out, and he has a lot of form as well. There's complexity in her dress. They're still blended in with everything else. It doesn't really call out as much, but it has a very interesting mood to it, which is what I really like about this painting. It's a cool combination, I want to say, of like realism and impressionism. Like he melded that pretty well together. And you could see also in the background, the people aren't really defined as much. They're just suggested there. Like if you look at the couple at the top left, they're kind of melded into one another to say that they're like embracing each other. He has his arm around her waist, she has her arm around his neck. But it's not incredibly defined. It just kind of sets the tone that they're having a moment in this like social environment. It seems like this guy's like super interested in a woman, and she's I don't know, she's somewhere else. But it has this very dreamy sort of quality to it, which I really dug. Similar to this as well, you know, I'm gonna say it also has that sort of feel. Also good example of like his impressionistic style, especially when you look at the clouds. It's not hyper realistic, but notice something that I actually am noticing now, and I think it's intentional. Take a look at the clouds right above the ox, right in the middle, smack in the middle. What do you see there? I'm seeing two eyes. So it has this like spiritual quality to it. It has this idea of a divine spirit, right? It's a very, very interesting way of doing it. But if you look at the rest of the clouds, they're not super realistically rendered. It's just brushstrokes combined together all around, and it just convinces you that those are clouds. You know, that's the interesting thing about his style, is that it's very chaotic, but unifying at the same time. Like, you know what he's doing because you could see the guy, and the composition is there, the body language is there. You know, it's not off balance. You could see that he's like holding it properly, and his body suggests that he's in pretty good control over it. And the way that he rendered the oxes as well, like, you know, you could see that he's really on top of it. You know, he's not just splashing colors around with his brush. It's very intentional, but also, as I mentioned, pretty chaotic. Just looking at the bottom right, like looking at all the grass that's there, not a lot of detail there, but good use of color. Their tonal range is very close. You know, that red that you see at the bottom left, it's not too far away from the green. You know, the green isn't incredibly vibrant, and the red isn't incredibly vibrant. The warmth of the colors is very close. So that's an important thing to take note of. That's something that helps unify a painting. And also the yellows that you see all around as well. So just incredible work. Here is another example of like this kind of dreamy scene. You know, it's not, he doesn't have trouble with detail. Like, you could see the guy at the left corner, but he's not way too into detail. And in fact, the environment around him as well, that's not a lot of detail. You can't really tell what's going on over there. But her face is very much defined. You know, in fact, the lighting is really well done, you know, to show certain areas that are getting this like highlight from those lamps at the top. It's very cool. But also the dress itself, you know, so going from the face being so defined, and you could see these like very specific highlights, to looking at the dress, it's very chaotic. It doesn't have doesn't even have any boundaries to it. It just kind of seems like it's bleeding into the painting or its surroundings. It's like connected with everything around. So again, it's this like really cool combination of both, you know, impressionism and realism combined together. And I think that's one of his unique qualities, is not just that combination of style, but mood that he brings out with each and every one of these paintings. You know, from going to that scene with everything being really blue, you know, it having this like melancholy sort of vibe to it, to having this sort of scene, it almost seems angelic, right? If you want to look at it that way. His face has some sort of like, I'm going to say some sort of mesmerized expression, you know, almost like he can't believe he doesn't believe what he's looking at. And with her having this sort of like, ethereal, if that's the word that I'm looking for, vibe to it, like this angelic quality because of this like, glow that she has all around, right? Since he doesn't really define the dress that much, and the other stuff that's around her, it has this certain emanating sort of vibe about her. And I want to say that the shawl that she's wearing, the see-through shawl, also could suggest wings a little bit. So I'm gonna go with that. I think it's this like, again, it's this like spiritual concept combined, as you saw in the other one where the guy was like holding the oxes and like mowing through or whatever, collecting the harvest. There was the presence of God, the eye, right? The eye of the beholder was present in the clouds. It looked very specific, I'm gonna say, so I don't think that it's an accident or it's a coincidence there. It's very much that. So he combines all those things, the impressionism and realism, the mood, this like spiritual sort of vibe. That's really, really unique. Here, I think this is another example of just that. This sort of like wonder, you know, of existence. Somebody who's just laying and checking out the stars. No phones. You know, something also to take note of, like how different life was. Totally far away from any social media or any sort of distraction, just being out in the open and observing nature and just having this like curiosity for existence and surrounding and environment, you know, looking up into the sky and just seeing how majestic and unfathomable this whole existence really is, you know, just being in this planet, I guess, when there's so much going on outside of it. You know, there's like all this other stuff that isn't connected to politics, that isn't connected to social media or how cool you are or whatever. It's this like complete and unknowable, chaotic, beautiful thing that just exists. And I think a lot of times we neglect that. We get so caught up in all this other you know, man-made stuff and all this like social construct that we kind of forget about how amazing and how limitless existence is, how limitless and how much there is to see and discover outside even this planet. You know, there's so much to even discover within this planet. But to think that all these other galaxies and, you know, planets that are out there and what's going on over there, it kind of sucks. Like, that's where I guess I get my FOMO from. It's like, you know, there's all that to see. And am I going to get a chance to see it? You know, it kind of sucks. But at the same time, it's really amazing to just try to come up even with what is going on out there. Like, what's happening in that reality. But I think this kind of illustrates that well. You know, he does, the way he draws this guy's or paints this guy's face, it really shows wonder. You know, he's really wandering and just, he's completely lost in this like cosmic sort of exploration that he's having, accompanied by a friend and two friends, you know, his dog and dude next to him, I guess. And they're just chilling on this beach, or who knows. I'm gonna say it looks like a beach because it looks sandy, but it could be a field. All right, I'm gonna do one more. And I'm gonna end it here, guys. There's one more artist after Harvey T. Dunn. So that's going to be a wrap, I'm going to say, for Gil Elvgren's influences. You guys are going to get to see me talk more about the book, but I'll get to that in just a minute. I just wanted to talk about this painting and how beautiful it is. I think he really was able to capture, I don't know, I guess there's like a certain wonder to it, and also there's like peacefulness to it. There's like so many different things that are going on over here. First off, very beautiful feminine depiction, right? Just within the hands, and I guess the curvature to pretty much everything. There's a certain level of sophistication, and there's a certain level of, what's the word that I'm looking for here? Sincerity. I'm going to say there's a certain level of sincerity. I don't think you would find expression like this, or you don't find much of it. Like through social media, there's so much artificial sort of expression, whereas I think this is a very genuine one, and it's something that really also has to do with the time period as well, I'm going to say, because not everybody was able to take photos at the time. You know, people didn't have phones, people didn't have cameras. So that sort of existence, this obsessiveness that we have now, selfies and taking pictures of everything and always and every day and multiple times a day, that didn't exist at that time period. And I think that also grounded people more to experience things, you know, not to be obsessed with themselves. Because essentially what we're doing right now, I think, is just kind of staring at the mirror. You know, it's like the equivalent of that, of a person who's just constantly looking at the mirror. With these selfies that people take, and you look at some of the profiles, and it's like the same, it's the person's face like 50 times or 60 times over and over and over again. There is a benefit to it, I'm going to say, but I think it's that over indulgence, the same way as televisions were. I'm going to say, like, when televisions first came out, everybody was obsessed and they were glued to TVs, whereas now people don't even have regular cable more. They're like just subscribing to certain things, and TV is kind of like faded out a bit. It's more about social media, people being on their phones, that sort of thing. So I'm going to say it's a craze, you know, that people are overindulging in, and it's, in some ways, I think it brings about a little bit of that self-centeredness, where people are just way too focused on themselves. And capitalism kind of exacerbates that. You know, it talks about this whole self-promotion thing and what you need to do to get likes, and how you have to sell yourself, and people are just completely wrapped up in that. But I think this painting just kind of takes you out of that, or at least it takes me out of that, and just kind of puts me into a place of just being, just existing and feeling the vibes and feeling the environment and thinking about stuff, and just being alive and present, you know, not just constantly chasing one thing to another, just really being content. I'm gonna say that's another word that really shows in this painting, is her being very content and peaceful internally. There's a lot that face expression from this painting alone, it just shows, and also just very dreamy quality as well, like just from the background, not really seeing much there, and how it also works with her outfit, which is slightly different. You know, it's not completely without detail. There's all that complexity in the brush strokes that create folds. You know, like looking at that, there is no shadows really, right? And I guess that has something to do with light, but it's also exaggerated. Notice how there aren't any real dark colors, even around where her arm is resting on her body. You would think there's some dark lines there, since no light is reached. But I think that kind of adds, or is the point, is that you want to focus on her face expression. You want to focus on the femininity of her hand. Just the overall vibe, as opposed to this very technical concept. But despite that, still technically amazing. You know, to begin to think of like how to make all those brush strokes with all those colors. It's incredible. I'm gonna say it's incredible work. So that's Harvey T. Dunn, everybody. I'm gonna continue on next week. This is gonna be probably the last episode, or part 9 is probably gonna be the last of all the influences. I think the book had a couple of more people listed there, and I might venture into it at some point. But I will give you guys more glimpse into the book. I'm going to actually talk about Gil Elvgren. You know, after reviewing all these artists, I'm going to read through the entire thing, talking about him, his influences, all over again. So you guys get like the whole general scope of who he was. And then show you all the different eras. That's what's going to be really interesting to see, is that it's going from 20s, I'm going to say like 1920s, 30s, 40s, 50s, 60s, and 70s. And you guys are going to get to see how that style changed, how his subjects changed, like how he presented them in more of like a sexual context. That also changed from year to year, you know, starting out from like the 20s, and what was acceptable back then was very different when, as opposed to like the 70s, right? Like when people were a lot more free-spirited, quote unquote, and easygoing. So it's going to be fun to just look through all that. And that's going to be a book. So it's not going to be so much this. And you guys are going to have a little bit more of an interactive, I guess, experience with it. But that pretty much does it, everybody, for tonight, for this week. I hope you guys enjoyed this. I absolutely love talking about this. I love looking at the paintings themselves. You guys can, you know, just take your time and observe this with playing your own music, just looking at their art and, you know, muting all this other stuff and just observing it, because really that's what it's about. It's really to show you guys all these artists, and notice how like each and every one of them was so different, from J.C. Leyendecker to James Montgomery Flagg to Norman Rockwell to Harvey T. Dunn. They're all very much unique, and they all have their own contribution, their own voice and aesthetic. All right, everyone, that does it. Thanks again for tuning in. If you guys enjoyed this content, just remember to hit that like and subscribe button. They're both greatly appreciated by me. And I hope you guys enjoy your weekend. I'll see you next week.